Welcome to the Crime Hunters, where we delve into the darkest corners of criminal history. In today's episode of our medical crime series, we're exploring a case that is both horrifying and deeply unsettling, the story of Harold Shipman, the doctor who became one of the most notorious serial killers in history. Picture this: a trusted physician, someone you rely on for your health and well-being, is secretly taking lives instead of saving them. This nightmare was the reality for many patients of Harold Shipman in the UK during the 1990s. Shipman, a seemingly respectable and caring general practitioner, used his position of authority to mask his true nature. Over several decades, he orchestrated a killing spree that claimed at least 215 victims. In this episode, we'll examine the life and career of Harold Shipman, from his early years and his rise to prominence in the medical field, to his descent into a criminal underworld. We'll explore how he evaded detection for so long, the investigation that ultimately exposed his crimes, and the profound impact his actions had on the medical community and society at large. Join us as we uncover the chilling details of The Doctor Who Killed, a story that reveals how trust and authority can be twisted into something monstrous. Stay tuned as we delve into one of the most disturbing cases in true crime history. To fully grasp the gravity of Harold Shipman's actions, we need to look closely at the environment and circumstances that allowed his crimes to go unnoticed for so long. Harold Shipman was born in 1946 in Nottingham, England, and grew up in a modest working-class family. From a young age, he exhibited a keen intellect and a strong desire to help others. His academic success led him to Leeds Medical School, where he pursued his dream of becoming a doctor. By 1970, Shipman had earned his medical degree and began his career as a general practitioner. In the early 1970s, Shipman secured a position at a medical practice in Hyde, a small town in Greater Manchester. Hyde was a close-knit community where everyone knew each other, and trust was a cornerstone of daily life. Shipman quickly became a fixture in the town, known for his thorough and compassionate care. He was particularly well regarded for his dedication to making house calls, which was unusual for many doctors at the time. This personal touch endeared him to many of his elderly patients, who saw him as more than just a doctor. He was a trusted friend. Despite his outwardly respectable image, there were subtle signs that something was amiss. Shipman had a penchant for administering powerful painkillers, such as Diamorphine, a drug used to manage severe pain. He often did this under the guise of providing palliative care, but this practice would later become a key element in his crimes. Shipman's patients were primarily elderly, a demographic particularly vulnerable to sudden health changes and deaths, which may have made it easier for him to conceal his actions. By the late 1990s, the pattern of deaths among Shipman's patients began to raise eyebrows. There was a notable increase in the number of sudden and unexpected deaths, particularly among elderly women who had been under Shipman's care. However, his impeccable professional reputation and the trust he had built with the community meant that suspicions were slow to emerge. The situation was further complicated by the lack of immediate family involvement in many cases. Many of Shipman's elderly patients lived alone or had limited family connections, which meant that their deaths were less likely to be questioned or investigated thoroughly. This isolation provided Shipman with the perfect cover to continue his murderous activities without immediate detection. As we delve deeper into this case, it becomes clear how Shipman's professional facade and the community's trust allowed him to perpetuate his crimes. His dual life as a caring doctor and a calculated killer created a perfect storm of deception and tragedy. Understanding this context helps us appreciate the depth of his betrayal and the horror of his actions, setting the stage for the investigation that would eventually bring his heinous crimes to light. To fully comprehend the horror of Harold Shipman's crimes, we need to examine the methods he used and the chilling details of his murders. Harold Shipman's approach to killing was methodical and calculated. Operating as a general practitioner, he had access to powerful medications, which he exploited to carry out his crimes. The primary weapon in Shipman's deadly arsenal was Diamorphine, a potent opioid painkiller. Under the guise of providing palliative care, Shipman administered lethal doses of this drug to his victims. His knowledge of medicine and drug dosages allowed him to execute his murders with a disturbing level of precision. Shipman's victims were predominantly elderly women, many of whom were under his care for various health issues. His method of killing typically involved administering an overdose of Diamorphine, a drug that, when used improperly, can cause respiratory depression and death. Shipman would often visit his victims at their homes, a setting where he could administer the fatal dose privately and without suspicion. One of the most unsettling aspects of Shipman's crimes was the way he manipulated the appearance of natural causes of death. He would often falsify death certificates, listing causes such as heart failure, cancer, or natural causes, to avoid raising any alarms. His position as a trusted medical professional meant that his certifications were rarely questioned, allowing him to continue his killing spree with little to no oversight. A closer look at his patterns reveals a horrifying consistency. Shipman's victims often died suddenly and unexpectedly, a pattern that, over time, began to raise concerns among some family members and other healthcare professionals. However, the sheer number of deaths, combined with the trust Shipman had built with his patients and their families, meant that many of these deaths were initially accepted as unfortunate but natural. The turning point in uncovering Shipman's crimes came with the death of Kathleen Grundy in June 1998. Grundy, a well-known local figure, passed away under circumstances that initially seemed typical. However, her death raised suspicions due to the fact that Shipman had prepared a new will, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. This raised red flags among Grundy's family and friends, prompting them to investigate further. As investigators began to dig deeper into Grundy's death, they discovered discrepancies and inconsistencies that led them to scrutinize Shipman's practices more closely. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Numerous deaths among Shipman's patients had similar characteristics and circumstances. Forensic examinations and further research uncovered that many of these patients had died from diamorphine overdoses, leading to a broader investigation into Shipman's activities. The scope of Shipman's crimes was staggering. By the time he was apprehended, evidence suggested that he had been killing patients for over 20 years, with a death toll that could have been as high as 250. The full extent of his crimes shocked the public and the medical community, revealing a monster hidden behind the facade of a trusted healthcare provider. As we move forward, we'll explore the investigation that finally exposed Shipman's atrocities and the legal proceedings that followed. The horrifying details of his methods not only underscore the depth of his betrayal, but also highlight the critical need for vigilance and oversight in the medical profession. The investigation into Harold Shipman's crimes began to take shape after a series of troubling events surrounding the death of Kathleen Grundy, an elderly woman and a prominent local figure in Hyde. Her death on June 24, 1998, initially seemed to be a natural occurrence, but it soon became the catalyst that would unravel Shipman's horrific crimes. Kathleen Grundy's death raised immediate concerns due to the discovery of a new will that had been drafted just before her death. This will, prepared by Shipman, named him as the sole beneficiary, which was highly unusual and suspicious given that Grundy had previously been known to have a different will. Her family, already feeling uneasy about the circumstances, sought to investigate further. The first red flag was the nature of Grundy's death. Despite her age and health issues, her passing was sudden and unexpected. Her family's doubts grew as they learned about the new will. They contacted the police, which led to the initial examination of Shipman's practices. The investigation initially focused on Grundy's case but quickly expanded as investigators began to scrutinize Shipman's patient records. They discovered that Grundy's death was not an isolated incident but part of a disturbing pattern. A review of Shipman's patient files revealed an alarming number of deaths that shared similar characteristics: sudden, unexpected deaths of elderly patients, often following visits from Shipman. Forensic analysis was critical in piecing together the evidence. Authorities conducted autopsies on the bodies of Shipman's deceased patients, and these investigations revealed a troubling trend. Many of Shipman's patients had died from diamorphine overdoses. This was a significant breakthrough, as diamorphine was not typically prescribed in such high doses for the patient's conditions. As the investigation unfolded, the true scale of Shipman's crimes began to emerge. Police and forensic teams identified a pattern of behavior and evidence that indicated a systematic approach to his killings. Shipman's modus operandi became clearer. He would administer fatal doses of diamorphine to his victims during house calls and then falsify their death certificates to cover his tracks. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a database of Shipman's patients and cross-referenced it with death records. This comparison revealed an unusually high number of deaths among his patients, further confirming suspicions. Shipman's pattern of prescribing lethal doses to elderly patients became apparent, leading to a deeper dive into his professional history. Shipman was eventually arrested in September 1998 after a thorough investigation that involved extensive interviews, forensic analysis, and the review of thousands of patient records. His arrest marked the beginning of a high-profile trial that would bring to light the full extent of his crimes. The investigation into Shipman's activities was a landmark case in criminal history, highlighting critical issues in medical oversight and trust. It prompted widespread changes in how deaths are reviewed and how medical professionals are monitored, aiming to prevent such abuses in the future. As we continue, we'll examine the trial and the legal proceedings that followed Shipman's arrest, exploring how the evidence against him was presented and how the case concluded. The trial of Harold Shipman was a highly publicized and emotionally charged event, reflecting the gravity of his crimes and the deep impact they had on the victims' families and the broader community. Harold Shipman was formally charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery related to the falsification of Kathleen Grundy's will. His trial began on October 5, 1999, at the Old Bailey in London, a fitting venue for such a high-profile case. The prosecution's case was built on a mountain of evidence that painted a damning picture of Shipman's criminal activities. Central to the prosecution's argument was the forensic evidence showing that Shipman's victims had died from overdoses of Diamorphine, a drug Shipman had administered. Autopsies confirmed that many of the deaths attributed to Shipman's patients involved this powerful opioid, which was administered in lethal doses that were inconsistent with the medical needs of the victims. The prosecution also presented evidence from Shipman's patient records, which revealed a troubling pattern of sudden and unexplained deaths among his elderly patients. Expert testimonies from forensic pathologists and medical professionals helped establish that these deaths were not due to natural causes but rather to deliberate overdoses. Throughout the trial, Shipman's defense team attempted to challenge the evidence, arguing that the deaths could have been due to natural causes or other factors. They also questioned the reliability of the forensic evidence and the motives behind the allegations. However, their efforts were largely undermined by the overwhelming volume of incriminating evidence and the detailed testimonies of experts who demonstrated that Shipman's actions were both deliberate and systematic. The emotional testimony from the victims' families added a poignant and personal dimension to the trial. Families described their shock and grief, painting a vivid picture of the personal losses they had endured. Their testimonies highlighted the profound breach of trust and the devastating impact of Shipman's actions on their lives. After a trial that lasted several weeks, the jury returned a verdict on January 31, 2000. Harold Shipman was found guilty of 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. The jury's decision was met with a mixture of relief and horror as it confirmed what many had feared. The extent of Shipman's betrayal was as deep as it was shocking. The judge, Mr. Justice Forbes, sentenced Shipman to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This sentence reflected the severity of his crimes and the profound breach of trust involved. Shipman's conviction was a landmark moment in criminal justice, serving as a stark reminder of the need for vigilance in professions of trust and authority. Following his conviction, Shipman was the subject of significant media coverage and public scrutiny. His case prompted widespread reforms in medical practices and oversight, aiming to prevent similar abuses in the future. The impact of Shipman's crimes extended beyond his trial, leading to changes in how healthcare professionals are monitored and how suspicious deaths are investigated. As we reflect on the trial and conviction of Harold Shipman, we see a clear example of justice being served in the face of egregious wrongdoing. It's a reminder of the importance of accountability and the need for rigorous checks and balances to protect vulnerable individuals in our society. The case of Harold Shipman had profound and far-reaching impacts on the medical community and society as a whole. His crimes not only shocked the public but also prompted significant reforms in medical practice and oversight. One of the most immediate impacts of Shipman's conviction was the scrutiny placed on medical practices and the way deaths are recorded and reviewed. Prior to Shipman, the healthcare system relied heavily on the trust placed in doctors, often without rigorous checks on their practices. Shipman's case exposed the vulnerabilities in this system and highlighted the need for increased oversight. In response to Shipman's crimes, several key reforms were implemented to prevent similar abuses. The National Health Service, NHS, in the UK undertook a comprehensive review of its procedures for monitoring doctors. This led to the establishment of more stringent guidelines for the certification of death and the requirement for second opinions in cases of sudden or unexplained deaths. These measures aimed to ensure that no single medical professional could hold unchecked power over life and death. Additionally, the Shipman case prompted changes in how medical professionals are supervised and how complaints are handled. The introduction of the National Clinical Assessment Service, NCAS, was one such reform, designed to provide early intervention for doctors whose practices raise concerns. This organization was established to ensure that doctors with questionable practices could be identified and addressed before any harm could occur. Shipman's case also had a significant impact on public perception of healthcare professionals. The trust that patients place in their doctors is crucial, but Shipman's crimes eroded that trust to a degree. The need for transparency and accountability in the medical field became more apparent, leading to increased public and professional awareness about the importance of safeguarding against medical malpractice and abuse. The Shipman case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and the necessity for systemic safeguards. It also served as a catalyst for broader discussions about ethical practices in medicine and the need for robust mechanisms to protect patients. In reflecting on Shipman's legacy, it is clear that while his actions were deeply disturbing, they led to meaningful changes that have improved the safety and integrity of medical care. His case remains a powerful reminder of the need for vigilance, oversight, and accountability in professions of trust. As we conclude our exploration of Harold Shipman's story, we remember the lives lost and the lessons learned. The reforms and changes that followed his conviction stand as a testament to the resilience of the systems designed to protect and serve the public, ensuring that such a tragedy is less likely to occur in the future. As we wrap up our exploration of Harold Shipman, it's clear that his story is one of profound betrayal and tragedy. From a respected physician to one of the most notorious serial killers in history, Shipman's case serves as a stark reminder of the dark potential that can lurk behind a facade of trust and professionalism. The sheer scale of his crimes, over 200 lives lost, highlight the critical importance of vigilance and oversight in professions of trust. Shipman's actions not only shocked the public but also led to significant reforms in medical practice, aimed at preventing similar abuses in the future. His case has prompted changes that have made the healthcare system safer and more accountable. While Shipman's legacy is a somber one, it has also sparked necessary conversations about ethical practices and the importance of safeguarding against abuse. His story underscores the need for rigorous monitoring and transparency to protect the vulnerable and maintain public trust in medical professionals. Thank you for joining us on the Crime Hunters as we delved into this chilling case. If you found this episode insightful, please like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with more episodes from our medical crime series. Next time, we'll be exploring another disturbing case that has shaped the world of criminal justice. Until then, stay curious and stay vigilant.